10:34 on this Tuesday afternoon. I had to double check. I wasn't sure if it was Tuesday or Wednesday in my head.
It's becoming that way with the World Cup going on.
Right?
Totally lost all sense of time.
Yes. And the Brendan Sorsby saga has also played a role in kind of losing track of time a little bit. This has come to at least some semblance of an endpoint, at least from a college football perspective, with the ruling yesterday, with the decision yesterday by Brendan Sorsby to put his name in for the NFL's Supplemental Draft and forego the final year of eligibility that he had in college football. He is moving on to the NFL, or at least he's going to attempt to. He will not play this fall for Texas Tech.
So there's a lot that has happened.
There's a ton.
Especially in the last 24 hours. But let's start with what we have as far as facts around this to begin with. This is ripped from a couple different articles just to kind of bullet point this, right? For those that don't know or have been out of the loop on this whole thing, Sorsby permanently banned by the NCAA after placing more than 9,000 bets, which is a lot more than I was giving him credit for a couple weeks back, totaling at least $90,000 on professional and college sports over 4 years while enrolled at Indiana, Cincinnati, and Texas Tech. It includes 40 wagers involving Indiana football when he was on the team as a freshman in 2022. He was recently granted an injunction by a Lubbock court to regain eligibility and would serve a 2-game suspension. That is where this firestorm kind of began. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton threatened the Big 12 with punitive fines if it attempted to punish Sorsby or Texas Tech following the injunction, basically saying, hey, man, everyone that's saying we're not going to play you if you play him, you can't do that. We're going to force you to abide by the ruling. So this is starting yesterday, and what really started the avalanche going was the Big 12 filing a counter lawsuit against Texas Tech and Paxton. Just those two parties. They were trying to bar Paxton from preventing them from exercising their right under their own bylaws to sanction Tech, because Tech agreed to them, and sought no damages in the ruling, and most importantly, didn't challenge Sorsby's overall eligibility. They were mostly attacking Tech specifically because that was within their right to do so.
And even more so, really, Paxton.
Exactly, because Paxton's... Essentially, this was the right hook that ended everything.
Yes.
Because at that point, like, they looked at how Paxton's filing occurred, and they're like, we can use that same channel to leverage our own weight in this. So at this point, the weight doesn't fall on the NCAA's shoulders. It falls on the conferences to maintain their own integrity on this. 6 hours later, Yormark informed Texas Tech president of the lawsuit itself, and a conference call with the Big 12 soon followed. The timeline then continued through the next day, or through the next couple hours here, if we can advance to the next graphic. At 8 a.m., so 2 hours later, the Kansas Attorney General released a public letter. 2 hours after that, the NCAA filed an emergency motion to stay the Lubbock court injunction and motion for an expedited appeal, because the appeals process was initially supposed to take until after the college football season. 2 hours after that, the Utah Attorney General weighed in and is like, hey, we're supporting the Big 12. And then finally, 8 hours later, Sorsby essentially not cuts ties with Texas Tech, but is like, I'm not playing. I'm entering the NFL Supplementary Draft. So all of this happened within a span of like 18 hours very quickly.
Imagine if our legal system could work this quickly on things that actually matter.
Seriously, though.
Wouldn't that be nice?
That would be nice. Public
like
pressure.
Every 2 hours, another step in the process, another link in the chain. Could we do that with things that are actually important to humanity? I know everybody loves college football, but really what we're talking about here is fundamentally meaningless to actual real life. And bing, 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 boom. Problem solved.
I have a question.
Yes.
What is the supplemental draft?
I'm so happy you asked.
Thank you, Kelly.
We have graphics for that, too.
And I'm not the only one with the question. Schottenheimer is also wondering.
That is absolutely true.
It's extremely granular. It very rarely actually becomes something that the NFL needs to do, because it's usually only like one guy per season.
Yeah.
And even at that, it's one guy every 5 or 6 seasons, maybe.
Right.
It's very, very rare that it actually comes into effect.
That is correct. So if we can pull up the first graphic here, we'll start walking through this process. The supplemental draft is an alternate summer draft for college players who missed the NFL draft filing deadline. Sometimes it is that simple. They just didn't file in time, and they want to get in a different way. Most players have lost their college eligibility for some reason or another. Sometimes it's bans for PED use or over-the-counter substances or something on those lines, or in this case, it's gambling. It was first held in 1977. Only 46 players have ever been selected, so it's not like even over that span. It's been one per year. It's almost like one every 2, if that. Sometimes 2 in 1 year. So the ratio is a little off there. The order for selection. So this isn't just like, hey, man, there's a lot of players up for this, and we're going to pick in a normal draft. Instead, it's kind of closer to the NBA lottery. The order, the teams are divided into 3 groups based on their win total. So if you're 6 or under, above 6 but didn't make the playoffs or did make the playoffs, you are put into one of those 3 groups, and the order of those groups is randomly selected. So it's not, hey, man, the Browns were winless this year, they get first crack at this. In that group of teams under 6 wins, it could be the team with 6 wins or with 5 wins that quote-unquote picks first. But this isn't a round robin either. Teams bid one of next year's draft picks on the desired player. They will waive that draft pick, and instead, the team with the highest offered pick of all of that chronology ends up being granted the player.
So, like, if the Cowboys wanted Sorsby, they would, and I'm not suggesting that they would or should.
But Schottenheimer was asked about this, yes.
He was, and he basically gave an answer that indicated they're not interested, even though he didn't actually say that. He's like, if we find ourselves interested, I'll learn more about this.
He tried his best to distance himself.
And said, I don't know much about this.
Right.
They would probably have to offer maybe a second-round pick to beat out a team at the bottom of the league that might try to offer a third-round pick, because if they both offer 3, Dallas would lose out to the teams with fewer wins.
But yes, that's
I don't
essentially
think
the
anybody's
idea.
offering a 1 here.
Right.
Probably.
But let's talk about some of the players that have been, because again, the supplemental draft, if you've never heard of it, you're sitting there thinking, is it even worth the time of day? What kind of players are coming out of this? It was last held in 2023. No player was selected. So even if they hold it and players are available, doesn't mean someone will actually get drafted through this process. The last player selected was in 2019 by the Cardinals, and it is now Cowboys defensive back Jalen Thompson, which is kind of interesting. A couple other noticeable supplemental draft picks in 2012. Wide receiver Josh Gordon noted marijuana issues in the league and trying to stay on that side of it. 2011 quarterback Terrell Pryor, which I'll get into here in a little bit. 94 was the last time the Cowboys have picked someone in the supplemental draft, tight end John Davis, and that was with a 4th-round pick. Last time the Cowboys selected someone with the 1st-round pick was quarterback Steve Walsh in 1989. And then 87, a couple names that I just like saying. Brian Bosworth, fascinating college personality, and Chris Carter, great career with the Vikings.
Worked out well.
And prior to that, I think
Schottenheimer
brought up Bernie Kosar. He was selected in 1985 with a 1st-round pick. So talent does come out of this. I think there were 7 Pro Bowlers and 1 Hall of Famer in the 46-person class. That's not bad.
This seems overly complicated.
It does. It does, but it gives.
It only happens every once in a while. It's just
but
it's just legalese
and ultimately it gives players who did something against NCAA rules a chance to have an NFL career. And I think the best example of that is Pryor, who essentially was making money off of merchandise, which now is like, are you kidding me? Why is this
imagine
a
a time
If
where
you
that was
don't
illegal?
make money off of merchandise, what are you doing?
Right, but he was essentially given a 5-game suspension. He then declared for the supplemental draft after that was handed down. And what was interesting about that process was he goes through the supplemental draft, gets drafted, but the NFL enforces that 5-game suspension. They did uphold and carry over, which is I think kind of precedent in this area. And granted, that's 15 years ago now, so they might look at this situation very differently. But
has it really been that long since
2011? Yeah.
It is interesting, though, that like in that scenario, it didn't feel all that necessary or relevant for the NFL to uphold the penalty, other than just we feel like you should have to pay a penalty.
Right.
This one feels more applicable. Like, well, no, that if you're like, for a player to be making money and then he goes to the NFL, what reason does the NFL have to go, oh, how dare you make money playing football?
But I think
this one makes more sense.
Yes.
That, okay, we are concerned if you're gambling. We
Right.
are concerned about what you're doing and whether or not you're actually healed from your addiction, whether or not you've actually done the work to move past this. That feels a lot more applicable, and it feels like a situation where the NFL either says, okay, you can go into the supplemental draft, but you're going to serve a 1-year suspension, or they just tell them, hey, just apply for 2027. You're going to sit out the 2026 football season in some form or fashion.
Or they can avoid all of this and not say anything. Because, again, he goes for the supplemental draft process. There's no telling he gets drafted. Again,
Well, sure. Yeah.
they don't have to announce. They don't have to levy a penalty. He just doesn't make it on a roster. You know what I mean? Like that's the NFL's purview in this. And the reason why I keep bringing it up from the NFL-NCAA relationship, the NCAA is all but the NFL's minor league. And they are aware of that. And I think to some degree, and you brought up Calvin Ridley the last time we discussed this, Ridley was like over a 3 or 4 day span when he was injured, right? And it was essentially served as 5-game suspension or something on those lines. But it was nowhere near the degree that what Sorsby is essentially accused of, which is 9,000 bets over a process of years, in which case some of it could have been underage, depending on when this started. So, the difference in magnitude changes how I think the NFL will approach this. But most importantly, and I think where we all come from on this, is Texas Tech is getting out of this. And what I mean by that is they can now start repairing some of the relationships that were about to be damaged through this whole process. And most importantly, they're going to help him get help. Because I said, he's retaining his NIL money. So whether or not Sorsby gets drafted, he's still going to make enough money to essentially be a first-round pick in the NFL to help himself through this gambling addiction process. And that's a huge boon for him. So ultimately, after this entire story where everyone's getting dragged through the mud, everyone should come out of this the right way, one way or another.
I have another question.
Yeah.
If he does not get selected in the supplemental draft, can he then declare for the regular draft next spring?
I suppose
I'm
it's
not
possible.
sure. I think so.
I suppose
but I'm
it's
not
possible.
Not sure.
But like, if you're not picked up with the supplemental draft with next year's draft picks,
Yeah.
Then that means no one's going to want to use a pick on you.
I would highly, to that end, I don't know if you're allowed to, but the supplemental draft, what you give up is far less than an actual pick in the NFL draft. I think
it's the same.
It's the
it
next
is, but
pick.
but it could be like so. Jalen Thompson was a 5th round pick,
Right.
from next year's draft. So you kind of have to weigh that assessment.
So
Some
it's
people
not necessarily that he wouldn't be allowed to declare. It's like kind of
if they didn't
he
waste
doesn't
the
get it here, it's not going to happen.
probably,
But I think the difference, though, there is, do they, as a league, decide, and by the way, Sorsby, if he wants to, could bring a lawsuit against the NFL, since he's not part of the NFLPA, if he feels like they are, as 32 teams, colluding against him and saying,
because it's worked for other
we're
people.
not going to draft. I'm not saying it's going to work. I'm just saying he can.
Right.
But if they decide, we're not going to take him in the 2026 supplemental draft because we feel like he should pay a punishment for the fact that he's done this and he needs to take the 2026 season off. But if they've all decided as a league, and it would be a lot cleaner if the NFL just does this rather than the 32 teams having to collude in this space, you're not going to play in 2026. But in 2027, you show us for a year that you're clean, that you're past this, that you've dealt with your addiction and you've moved past your gambling, then you can play in 2027. That radically changes the math in terms of whether or not a team would be willing and wanting to select him if they feel like he could actually play.
It just feels hot to touch. For a team that hates distractions, the moment he steps on an NFL roster or a practice field or anything, he'll be all anyone wants to talk about for about a week and a half.
Not every team hates distractions.
No, I'm aware of that. Some people need the eyeballs. I understand that part. But for as many other quarterback scenarios that have happened in recent NFL history, it feels like this follows that same trajectory of is the talent and the potential worth the headache from a media
the juice
perspective?
Worth the squeeze.
Yes.
The thing about this that I find fascinating, though, are the legal filings. Because if
Yes.
the Big 12's legal filing is the proverbial right hook, as you said earlier, Ken Paxton's filing is basically the legal equivalent of leaving your chin wide open.
Yes.
They would
It's like,
not have had the pathway
Hit me
to
Yeah.
figuring all of this out and filing what they did, the Big 12, if not for Ken Paxton's filing. That is what opened the floodgates for this thing to go from, we don't know how this thing's going to go, this is going to drag on all summer, this may drag on all through the season, to, nope, that's our pathway, that's how we solve this thing right now, and immediately, within a day, this thing is done and dusted.
It was called one of the most brilliant...
One of the most devastating
Yes.
legal filings anybody has ever seen. Brilliant. And
Bang.
it's done.
And this is the best outcome. This is the best outcome for all parties. It's done early. It doesn't
Including
drag into
Tech.
Yes.
all
Yes.
parties.
Yes.
Big 12 doesn't have to worry about it. The other teams don't have to worry about
Big 12 looks strong. Other teams look strong for stepping in on this.
stepping in. They don't have to cancel their matchups with Texas Tech. Sorsby now gets a shot at playing in the NFL theoretically.
And if he doesn't, he's got NIL
and it
money.
happens early enough that Tech can figure out what their quarterback situation is going to be for next year. Not as early, obviously, as they would want, but it's still June 16 and not August 16.
Yeah, but to me, the NIL Foundation, because again, they're not taking away from Sorsby. They are committed to him on that front. And I think that's the honorable thing to do in this case. Now, granted, some of it felt like a sunk cost, a couple weeks ago, but they're not choosing to look at, and maybe they're not promoting it from that aspect. That's one way to look at it. But they are actively helping him try to get help through this process, and I find that to be the right approach. And as long as you look at this from the perspective of the NCAA and Big 12 held their ground, and Texas Tech is helping a kid who needs help get help, and he's got a financial foundation to help that out.
Listen, this is
perfect.
This is how it had to end.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't bet on games and then walk right back into the same organization or league that you're gambling on.
Yeah.
That's the punishment.